Hi, Zach Reiser here, and welcome back to another bass effects review video. Today I am getting into the Subspace from Hamstead Soundworks. The Subspace, to first order, is a bass-specific version of their famous Odyssey pedal, which is a very versatile dirt pedal for guitar. And as you heard in my intro clip, the Subspace has a comically wide range of gain inside of it. You can go from full, completely crystal clear, clean boost, all the way to the most glitched out, crazy, oversaturated fuzz tones. The Subspace on the surface may seem a little bit complicated. It does have 6 knobs, 3 switches, actually 4 if you include the one on the back, but I want to try to show in this video that it's actually a very simple pedal to use. So I'm going to do a lot of explaining of the controls, and of course I'm going to go through many sound samples, including some of the ones that are in their own manual, and we'll do a little bit of effects blending as usual. Here's my bass's dry tone Dingwall ABZ 6-string on the neck pickup. So really quickly, I want to explain a few of the controls before we get started, mainly the 3 switches on the bottom. The leftmost switch is the clipping selection, or kind of the character of your drive. So on the far left, you have a symmetrical distortion, which is going to be reminiscent of kind of like an effects pedal distortion. In the middle is your asymmetrical clipping, and this to me is very like raw and guttural. It can be on the subtle side, but I think it really excels when you crank the gain and it gets super oversaturated and pretty crazy. And on the right side, you actually have 2 clipping circuits, which gives you kind of this amp-like distortion, and it's very touch-sensitive and very organic and very natural sounding. The switch in the middle has to do with where you're placing the EQ circuit in relation to the drive. So the EQ circuit is the bass and treble knob on the top right of the pedal. Those are boost and cut knobs, and we'll get to those in a minute. And you can place them pre the drive circuit, which would be the switch to the left. So that would be great if you want to, for instance, boost the bass into the distortion to make it really bloom, or if you wanted to maybe cut the treble so that the distortion isn't so clangy with a pick attack, for instance. You could put it post the drive circuit, which is when the switch is to the right. So that's more of your classic kind of studio style EQ shaping where you can cut the bass and the treble of the actual already distorted signal. And then also very cool is if you put it in the middle, it is functioning purely as an EQ with no distortion. So it cuts the clipping essentially completely out of the circuit. So you have control of a kind of EQ'd clean boost, for instance. So the switch on the right is actually pretty simple. It's essentially how hot your signal is or how high your input gain is. So at X1, it's just your unity bass's volume. At X2, it's essentially doubling the input gain of your instrument. And then at X5, it's actually 5 times the amount of input gain that your instrument has. So you can really slam those clipping circuits if you want to for some crazy fuzz tones. I apologize for all the talking, but I did feel like that was some important information for you to have as I go through some sound examples. So let's get to what this thing actually sounds like. So the first thing I want to get into is just the general character difference between the different clipping circuits. And that's a little bit tricky because it's all very interdependent on what the other switches and knobs are set to. They can really change the sound of all of these clipping circuits. But for now, I'm going to leave everything the same and just change the clipping switch and the level to balance out the volume. Now, as everyone who watches my channel knows, I love synth-based sounds, and specifically I love running octavers into distortion pedals. But I actually feel like that running a clean sub-octave tone into the Subspace really shows off the difference in the character of the drives because you're not really getting any harmonics from my bass. So you're hearing kind of almost like a pure sine wave getting broken up by the different clipping circuits. So this is my Boss OC2 Pure Wet by itself. And now let's run it into some slightly higher gain settings of all 3 clipping circuits. So now that I've kind of briefly gone over the clipping options of the pedal, I want to spend a little bit of time going over the EQ options of the pedal. One simple example for this EQ option is I've boosted the bass and the treble a little bit, which is going to give your ear the perception of a scooped mid-range. It's also going to give the top end a nice little zing to it, so you can get that kind of classic scooped, slapped sound. Without the subspace. And with. So another fun EQ option that the Subspace gives you is to kind of dub out your sound. So I've cranked the bass and I've turned the treble way down. So I'm getting that super big, bassy, kind of almost reggae vibe. Without the Subspace. With the Subspace. So now I want to demonstrate kind of what the pre and post will do to your sound overall. So I have the pedal set up exactly as shown right now. EQ is 100% flat. With a pick, it sounds like this. Right now, the EQ switch is on the post side. So essentially what that's doing is affecting the entire distorted signal. So if I turn down the treble, it's going to turn down kind of all of my high-end sizzle, and you're going to get a much darker sounding drive tone. But now, if I switch the EQ switch to the pre-setting, you're putting kind of less treble frequencies into the distortion. So you still have the high-end sizzle, but it's not quite as apparent because you're not giving it as much of those high frequencies to begin with. So now I've switched to that asymmetrical clipping, which is yet again that really raw clipping option. I'm doubling my input gain to get more into that fuzz territory. Pedal as shown sounds like this. Now in post, if I boost the bass, I am literally just boosting the bass of the entire signal, so it's going to really fatten up this particular sound, but it's not really going to change the drive character at all because you're not changing what you're putting into the drive circuit. So you can hear it's super fat and big, but the actual character of the drive has not changed. But if you go pre, now I'm running a really massively bass boosted signal into this oversaturated fuzz. And so it's going to basically kind of freak out the fuzz and make it glitch out a little bit. So let's start with some kind of low gain, touch sensitive drive. I'm in that amp-like clipping mode, or C3. I have my normal unity gain going in terms of that X1 amount. The switch on the back is in the -10 setting, so that's giving me more kind of fine-tuned control over the amount of gain into the clipping stage. And then also my EQ is post the distortion. And I have a good amount of clean rolled in here as well, because I feel like it just kind of rounds out this nice low gain sound. Adding on to this low gain drive just a little bit, I've taken a nice dark delay from my Strymon Volante with a touch of reverb, because I really feel like this particular setting really excels at some higher register kind of soloing playing. Moving on from that low gain kind of amp-like clipping, I want to go to more of a traditional distortion tone. So I've gone to the symmetric clipping option, so yet again more like a traditional pedal effect distortion box. Unity gain in regards to the switch in the back, and the X switch is in the middle position, so I have double my unity gain, so even more clipping on tap here. And with these particular setups, you get a just really clear but still pretty gnarly distortion tone. This particular distortion setting here I think sounds absolutely killer with an octaver in the traditional octave use. So I have my dry signal blended in. This is my Boss OC2 without the Subspace. And now with the Subspace. So I've been keeping things relatively tame so far with the Subspace settings, and I feel like it's time to see how much of a beast this thing can really be. So I am cranking as much input gain as possible into the clipping stage. I have the switch on the back at 0. I have the X switch at the 5 position, so 5 times my unity gain. Also notice I have the EQ running pre the clipping stage, and I have cranked the bass and treble, so I'm running more gain from the EQ, so it's really going to cause a lot of bloom and a lot of squash. I'm also using that asymmetrical clipping mode, which is really raw and gets really splatty at these high gain settings. This particular setting, when you run a pure sub-octave signal into it, is basically a flat square wave, and it sounds super fat. So here's my Boss OC2, just the sub, running in to the Subspace. And just to give this a little bit of extra movement, I'm going to run the OC2 into the Subspace and then both of those into just a classic Phase 90 phaser to give it some movement. One more particular setting for you here. This is yet again another high gain option, but it's a much more controlled high gain fuzz sound than the last one. So this is using the amp-like clipping option rather than the asymmetrical clipping option with the X2 or double unity gain versus the 5 times unity gain of the prior example. And then also notice that the EQ is still going pre the clipping, but instead of boosting the bass and the treble, I'm actually cutting the bass and the treble pre-clipping. So what ends up happening is I'm clipping mostly the mid-range. So I'm getting those really clear kind of frequencies that help you bump up or cut through a mix. I'm also rolling in a lot of clean blend here just to keep my pick attack nice and crisp. Just to take this sound to another plane, I have a nice multi-tap kind of Benson Echarec emulating delay on my Strymon Volante with a good amount of reverb as well. And I'm going to play a little higher up on the neck to almost get into kind of those Gilmore-ish vibes. So that is my demo of the Subspace from Hamstead Soundworks, a unbelievably versatile distortion pedal that is quite the Swiss Army knife that can go from, as you've heard in this video, 100% clean all the way up to ungodly amounts of saturated fuzz and anywhere in between. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe below. It really does help me out. And I will be back very shortly with more pedals and effects demo videos, as well as some performance videos and more. So thank you so much for watching. Bye.